Hello and welcome to the Fulhamish YouTube channel. We're also live on Twitter. It's Sammy here. And today, for International Women's Day 2021, we're hosting a live video. And I'm joined by two of Fulhamish's finest, Lydia Campbell. Hello, Lydia.
Hiya, how you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. And Izzy Barker as well. Izzy, how are we doing?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. And I'm really glad we were able to organise this today. And it wasn't actually my suggestion, really. And I'm really glad that it was brought up, because I think today what we want to discuss is the fact that what it's like to be kind of a female Fulham fan and supporting Fulham. And there's been so much progress, but also kind of you two and your rise within the kind of sports broadcasting industry and kind of your take from it. We've got a load of questions, and I'm going to sit back and just kind of ask the questions today. It's very much about you guys, not about me. So Lydia, I want to kind of get from you first of all, what has been your experience really supporting Fulham kind of through for a female scope? And you've been involved in kind of Fulham fan media for such a long time, with Hammy Ends mostly, and then a little bit with Fulhamish as well. What's that been like from your perspective?
I mean, when I first started writing about Fulham, it was a bit weird because obviously growing up in Northern Ireland, I didn't know other Fulham fans. I only knew people via social media or via Hammy End, which is kind of the one that the site that I use most. And so in that sense, it wasn't weird for me. It wasn't like I was in the middle of all the lads talking about Fulham. But at home, it was different, obviously, because the guys knew I was a Fulham fan. They got, my friends, but they didn't really take me that seriously because I was a girl. Because obviously at the time it was like, she knows a wee bit about football, but kind of leave all the chat to the guys, please. Whenever I started going to games, then it was a little bit different because I started to see a lot of women around. One of my favourite moments was when we played Aston Villa away. The year we went down, it was actually my first away game. I'm sure a lot of the hardcore fans will criticise me for that because that wasn't actually that long ago. But it's because living in Northern Ireland, like you can't, we couldn't get over the matches. It was only whenever I started going to uni in the mainland. But I was surrounded by all these guys, and my dad sitting beside me. And when we scored the winner, there was this girl in front of me, the two of us, the only females in sight, and she just turned around and threw her arms around me. Like the two of us were just hugging in the middle of all these celebrations. It was just really bizarre. But I think in general, like I've never had an issue at matches. I suppose for me, it's just in general, guys are still very surprised whenever you start talking about football, because they're not expecting someone to actually know what they're talking about, which, still, I've been working for BBC Sport now for coming up to 4 years, and it's still like that. Not in the workplace, but anywhere else, people are still, so you like sport then? Is generally the common question you get.
Izzy, what's your experience of supporting Fulham? Kind of when did it start? Just a bit of background, really, on kind of your supporting for the club. I know that your dad is a big Fulham fan as well. So just maybe talk about your experiences of supporting Fulham.
Yeah, well, I always used to go with my mum and my dad, and for me, I never noticed other women at the games. It was always sort of, for me, it was about just feeling included with the guys there. And I remember two guys used to always sit in front of us. And, they just used to chat to me and make me feel normal. And that's what I've really liked. And that's what I felt this whole time. And I remember the last time we were in the playoffs before last, and I remember going to the away game at Derby and just actually really feeling like embraced and just like chanting and drinking and having that whole experience, but not feeling like, oh, there's a woman there. So actually my experience has always been really positive. But yeah, I think you do notice when a woman is there, like before the games, if you walk into a pub or you're kind of drinking, It's like, oh, there's a woman, you do get a few looks. But like, my experience has been so good at Fulham, and yeah, at work people do notice it. On the road, it's like, oh, there is a woman there. But it's been really positive, and I think the mood and the attitudes have changed, and usually I'm just really positively embraced by the football world, I guess.
Yeah, and Lydia, what do you feel about kind of like International Women's Day, and also kind of like this kind of conversation, right? Do you think it's a positive thing that it's kind of looked at? Because on one hand, like, I think it's great to promote International Women's Day, of course, but also I look at you guys and I also do just see two Fulham fans like the rest of us with opinions that are kind of equal, and I've never really thought about it in any way. So I wanted to get from you kind of whether you feel like this kind of thing's necessary. I guess you must think so, otherwise you wouldn't have agreed to do the video. But also, like, maybe you think like, I just like to be seen as a regular Fulham fan like everyone else.
Yeah, look, I think you can come at this from two sort of angles. I think it's really important currently to have these kind of days and market and make people really aware of how many women out there actually love football and love sport in general. Because we still live in a day and age where people love the old "a woman should be in the kitchen" argument, and they're not actually serious. They're just saying it because they're trying to get a rise out of people. But those attitudes are still there. And when I grew up, I rarely saw female pundits or female sports reporters. So it is still something that we need. We need it marked to make sure that the next generation aren't feeling quite as isolated. From the other side of things, I'd kind of hope that a day like International Women's Day doesn't need to be a thing for that much longer, because we shouldn't just have one day to celebrate. But at the same time, it should just be, as you mentioned, we should just be seen as football fans and not female football fans. But I'm not sure we're quite there yet. So that's why I think it's just still really important to market and to make people aware that football is not just for boys the way it still, unfortunately, some people think.
Yeah, exactly. And it's 100% not. We've got a question here. We're going to go through loads of the questions, I think, because there's a lot coming through, actually. This one's from Brad. He says, is there anything male fans could do to make stadiums a more inclusive space? And I think even in the time that I've been going to Fulham, there are more and more women going to Fulham matches, and the proportion of women at Fulham matches has definitely increased. But Izzy, do you think there's anything that can be done? Because on one hand, like, I think you have to tread a difficult line here, don't you? Because go too far and it can look a bit patronizing. But of course, there's always small, subtle things that can be done. Maybe even just the marketing and promotion of football matches in general.
Yeah, for me, it's, you don't want special treatment. You literally just want to like enjoy your day and it to not be a thing. But for me, it's the little things like the toilets, the women's loo. There's a one loo, and then for men, it's like this whole thing. You run in, like urinals, whatever. For women, they're queuing at half time. Like, it's little things like that. It's ignoring the fact that women come to Craven Cottage. So yeah, for me, it's little things like that, and just being embraced, and it not being a weird thing, being able to have a pint and your gender not come into it.
Yeah, because you don't want to go down the whole like, oh look, here's some pink gin for the ladies. It's just like, that's not why you're coming to football matches. I guess. Next question from Farrell. He said, "Happy International Women's Day." And he said, from the fan survey last year, only 8% of respondents were women. I assume it's far less in journalism. It stinks. What can we do to make football/sport more inclusive of women? What small as well as large behaviours can we change? And what do you think that football can do, Lydia, in order to get it up from 8%, towards 50-50? And that's surely got to be the aim. Whether it will ever get to 50-50 is another question, but surely more than 8% of that engaged Fulham fans need to be women, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's quite a worrying statistic, that because there's definitely more than 8% of women in say the Fulham fan base. I mean, I would like to hope so. That's definitely what it looks like. It's more than 8%. But I think one of the issues is that there's these quite a lot of time there's this kind of lads attitude. And I've been in the middle of it lots of times and had to kind of guys feel like they have to, shut up and be quiet because we don't want to, there's a woman around. I've walked into press boxes where all the banter stopped the second I walked in. It didn't need to, it really didn't need to. But I think then similar in stadiums and things like that, where women naturally feel that our opinion is not quite as important. And I don't think guys necessarily try to do that. This isn't a guys v girls thing at all. It really isn't. But I think that because for so long, especially in the generations before us, people were used to going to matches with the guys. They weren't used to going with other girls. And what that meant then is that women are rarely in the conversation when it comes to football. And I think that is maybe one thing that's really important to kind of chip into and to engage with. We have loads of fantastic female bloggers like Joe and Laws, just to think of one example of people who are going to football matches every week and have been for years and have a lot to say about it. I think it's really important that those people feel like they can share their opinion and not be kind of smirked at. Because I know I've had that experience quite a bit in the past, and the only reason is because I'm a woman. It's not because my opinion wasn't anything valid. It was just a group of guys maybe just thinking that because I'm a woman, what I have to say wasn't quite as important, just because it came to football. Because a lot of people just think that the two things don't mix.
Izzy, what's your experience been like, kind of becoming a part of Fulhamish in the last year or so? It's just over a year since you did your first pod. You were kind of cruelly curtailed by the pandemic because you did the podcast and then about 2 weeks later we had lockdown and there was no more football. But obviously you've kind of stayed to be a part of it and you've done it virtually on the podcasts since then. And look, I don't think you need to be any kind of special fan to be asked to go on a podcast. But of course, we are on a pedestal and some people will think that we think our opinions are more important than others. We aren't. We're just fans that do a podcast. But look, it's obviously not just something that any person in the world feels like they can just go and say their opinions on a podcast. So what's that experience been like to kind of share your feelings on Fulham on a platform like Fulhamish?
Yeah, I think when you're a woman and you go into something like Fulhamish or sports journalism, you do think in the back of your head you are kind of maybe setting yourself up for a bit of sexist abuse, and it shouldn't be like that, but it does happen. But with Fulhamish, mostly it's either people really disagree with me or really agree with me, and that's great. People completely disagree with me, tell me to F off, that's fine. That is what I was kind of saying, like, disagree with me. I love that. You're listening to me, but you're not treating me any differently to any of the other guys. And that's the main thing. People are respecting, my voice, and they're choosing to agree and disagree. And I think that's the main thing, kind of being embraced and not treated any differently. And on the whole, I've not had any horrible sexist abuse. I think you get the odd kind of troll, but what's nice is the amount of people that then respond to that and have your back and the people that kind of watch, read and follow Fulhamish, which is so nice to see.
Yeah, exactly. And look, today, right, I'm hosting this and you guys kind of like said you wanted me to host this and anchor this today. I'd love that in International Women's Day in 2022 that I'm not hosting this and that we've found a kick-ass female anchor, host, etc. that's involved in Fulhamish. And I think that's part of the big thing today is that, like, I want anyone that feels like they can contribute and want to get their voice amplified on Fulham to kind of get in contact, whether they're male or female. But particularly if there are any kind of women out there today that are like, yeah, I love Fulham and I want to kind of share my opinions, or I'm a like young up and coming presenter and I want to kind of get ahead in sports media, like this is a platform where you can come and do that. Like me, Jack, have all kind of used Fulhamish to kind of increase our experience in the sports broadcasting industry, and I would love to give that opportunity to anyone that feels like they would use Fulhamish to their benefit. And yeah, fingers crossed it's not me in 12 months time. Not that I'm not enjoying being here, because I very much am. Latifa Dean asks, what about the abuse that female pundits get? It's way worse than for the guys, and I fully agree. And Lydia, I know that you mentioned on the podcast only a few weeks ago about the experience of Karen Carney, and kind of that was so horrible, that kind of pile-on that originated because she dared to say that Leeds might have been helped to win the league because of COVID, which was a poorly phrased but kind of okay thing to say. Like, she didn't, I don't know, say that Messi's a terrible footballer. She just said a fairly valid opinion that was slightly badly worded, like no worse than millions of pundits do every single day on channels. And look, you work in sports broadcasting, your voice is fairly regularly on the BBC Sport News channel. So what can be done to fix abuse? And look, there's lots of problems in terms of, you know, racism with black presenters that get abused as well, but particularly from a female scope, what can be done to try and change perceptions and show that abuse is just not okay in any forms?
Yeah, because I think it's important to point that out, that, you know, we want diversity in all of these things, whether that be with Fulhamish, whether that be in sports broadcasting in general. That's not just about male and female. It's about diversity in all kind of aspects, because what we're trying to do is to have, in this case, a Fulham fans channel that should appeal to every Fulham fan. You know, we shouldn't have groups of Fulham fans feel like their voice is never heard. And how you do that is by diversifying the people who are involved. What I would say about the abuse side of it, I think that it's much easier to abuse a woman because on social media. Anyway, if you take the Karen Carney example or the Sonia McLaughlin example, if you aren't aware, she is was BBC questioning. She was interviewing Owen Farrell and Jones after the England game a couple of weeks ago against Wales, and she has been absolutely hounded because of the interview. And you know what? I'm sitting there thinking there was absolutely nothing wrong with that interview. There was nothing wrong with it. But because that's the common thread in all these things, is because she's a woman, people feel like they can abuse and say really awful things. I'm similar to Isabel in that I haven't really had that much sexism directed at me, well, particularly not from a Fulhamish perspective or a Hammy End perspective. I think I've had one comment on Hammy End, which was my first one, which was a bit sexist. Other than that, people are generally very, very good. But what I would say is that we need to make these things less normal, and make people who think it's okay to abuse a female pundit just because she's a woman, that they're actually the ones in the wrong. We need to make them realise that actually that's a really dinosaur attitude to have, and that belongs 100 years ago. And you're going to get called out on it. I think that's the important thing, is calling people out on it.
Yeah, 100%. Izzy, Fulham is an interesting example when it comes to the women's team, because back in the early 2000s, Fulham was the first professional club to have, the first club to have a professional women's team. And obviously it's disbanded and now is part of the foundation, but is not part of the Women's Super League or anything like that. It plays at quite a low level within the game. But Sam Byrne-James, which is quite weird because that's also my name, asks, what's Izzy and Lydia's view on the club's investment / development of the women's team? And I guess purely from a Fulham angle, Izzy, do you find it a bit disappointing that Fulham doesn't invest more in its women's team, doesn't maybe look to have a team in the Women's Super League? I mean, the money's there. We know that the club could invest in this, or certainly would have the capital to, considering the money that's being spent on a new stand at the moment. Obviously, Mohammed Al Fayed maybe went not too far, but like he really was early to it back in the early 2000s. So what is your view on kind of Fulham's investment in the women's team?
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting question to ask today, because it was something I kind of didn't really think about going into this. But yeah, it's you can look at it kind of two ways, and you can look at the kind of circumstances and the fact that a lot of big clubs have women's teams below the championship, and at this point in time, they're not even training or playing because they've been classed as non-elite by the government. So that's a real shame that Fulham women aren't being able to train, but Fulham men are. What's the logic behind that? But that's not necessarily Fulham's fault. And I did find out recently that they're using the same training facilities as the men, which is a huge step now to be given that. You know, why should they not be sharing that? So that's really good. But now it's about pushing on for Fulham. It is disappointing, and also you're missing a trick if you're not investing in your women's team now. You really are, because it's growing so much, and it's only going to get bigger. Huge sponsorships now. You know, Barclays with the WSL, and I think Budweiser was the World Cup. So, you know, you're missing a trick, and I hope that encourages Fulham to invest more, because the women have full-time jobs. Some of them are NHS workers. Some of them, you know, are doing crazy night shifts. Some of them are studying degrees in medicine, and it's not good enough. You know, they need to be getting paid for football, or why should they be playing?
Yeah, one of them walked my dog, Sam Cole, who used to play for Fulham women. Was my dog walker, and I spoke to her quite a lot about it and her experience there, and she loved it. And the reason that she left was nothing actually really to do with Fulham or anything like that. It was a personal life choice that she made. But yeah, exactly. And I think the Women's World Cup, the last one, showed that the investment in that, it's not just purely because we want to make this equal level. Also, from a financial point of view, like 50% of the world is women, right? And like, it's mad that you wouldn't be investing in it right now when actually it's comparatively inexpensive compared to the men's game. And I think lots of other clubs have seen that, and it's a disappointment from a Fulham perspective that right now we don't seem to be putting that investment into the women's team. But also on a comparative sense, I would love for, you know, people like Fulhamish and Hammy End and Fulham Focus to maybe also start looking more at the women's team as well. I think we all have a part to play as fans as well, and if we all turned up and paid more attention to it, then maybe the club would see that actually there is some interest there. I think this goes both ways, rather than us just go invest more in the women's team when actually we couldn't care less and we don't ever think about going to games, etc. A couple more questions. Ella Dorman Gajic asks, Happy International Women's Day. Have you noticed a rise in female football fans in recent years? If so, do you think it's been affected by the rise in women's football teams? So Lydia, I guess she's asking is like, okay, maybe not in a Fulham perspective, but has the rise in women's football, have you noticed an increase in kind of popularity, both in playing and in spectating?
Yeah, I definitely have. And when I was back living in Northern Ireland, I joined a little football club, and like, I'm pretty useless, but I just wanted to go along and to get a bit of fitness, and I could not believe the structures in place. And this was one club in Northern Ireland, and you know, it is massively on the rise over there. Yet Northern Ireland probably are a little bit behind England in terms of their development of women's football. But what I see then is that's then reflected in all levels. Like, we had young girls now, again in Northern Ireland, it's not weird to go and play football. So many young kids are getting involved, and it's incredible to see, because I remember being reduced to tears as a primary school child, wanting to play football with the boys at lunchtime, and a dinner lady wouldn't let me because, oh, that's for boys. And I remember, you know, I vividly remember this. And, you know, it's just terrible, whereas that would never happen now. Would never happen. And in England, I get Facebook posts all the time, like, you know, it's classic targeting Facebook, because I'm interested in sport. I get loads of adverts for like female football teams around where I live and about joining up. There's so many more opportunities, and that will then filter across into spectating. The great thing is now that you can, obviously not at the minute because of the pandemic, but I live quite close to Lee Sports Village, which is where Manchester women play, And it's incredible that the adverts around the town, and that, you know, people see it's exactly the same as if you got a season ticket for Manchester United men's team. You know, as people are absolute diehard fans. And the other side of it as well is that, you know, when I'm in work and with the BBC, quite often we have female fans on talking about their teams, and it's not because we've done that on purpose. It's because we're genuinely just looking for fans, and there's so many more women nowadays who are willing to talk, which is absolutely brilliant for all sides of the game, whether that's playing, spectating, or the journalism side of it.
Speaking of the journalism side of it, Elizabeth asks, actually Elizabeth's a really big Fulhamish fan, and she always comments on our stuff, so big up Elizabeth, because yeah, she's always getting involved. She says, do you feel that your experience as a football fan / journalist is different from the norm because you're a woman, and what's your favourite thing about being a female football fan? Happy International Women's Day, ladies. Hashtag ask a female football journo. So Isabel, what is your favourite thing about being a female Fulham fan, and what are your experiences of being a female journalist?
Being a fan, it's just living and breathing Fulham, isn't it? I think all the kind of like traditions of just, you know, going to games, which seems so long ago for me now, and just kind of being there with my dad. And it's just, I don't know, it brings me like nostalgia every time, and sitting in the uncomfortable seats, but everything is just so perfect on the day. And yeah, I just love it. And I think just being involved, and like I was saying, having a pint, that ritual, and not being treated any differently, and being involved in something, and all kind of being together and celebrating, and limbs everywhere, just going mad. I just love it, and I miss it so much. But being a reporter, I guess you do get treated differently. It's always like, oh, there is a woman there. And you do get called love. But it's nice to see how many attitudes are changing. Like when I spoke to Sam Allardyce the other day, you'd expect him to be very like, you're right, love, and maybe a little bit sexist, but he was the opposite. He embraced my questions, and he was so respectful. And I think it surprises you. And it really has shown me that attitudes are definitely changing, and it's a lot better to get into for females. So I hope that encourages girls that are maybe feeling a bit nervous to get into it, to get into it and go and watch games as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I remember that Fulham versus Blackburn was the first ever game to have a female commentator for Match of the Day. It was Jackie Oatley back in the day, and there was such a big deal about it, and people were criticising her and saying that she wasn't good enough. And now Vicky Sparks, Lydia, is so regularly on Match of the Day. You don't even blink. You don't think about it. You don't go, oh God, it's the female one. You just kind of you just accept it as normal. It's just, and I guess that is the way it's going to get one day. But we are a long way from that in all aspects of kind of sports broadcasting and sports media.
Yeah, there's always room for improvement, isn't there? And I would say that the amount of females now in the industry in comparison to, you know, 10, 15 years ago, when I was a kid kind of looking up, is it's like night and day. And that's so important. There used to be this campaign, I think it's still going on in Ireland, and it's you can't be what you can't see. And it's the idea that you can't aspire to be something that you can, you know, that doesn't exist. So if there isn't a female broadcaster on, you're never, as a young girl, going to expect or have that aspiration. Same in any walk of life, be it doctors, lawyers, teachers, it doesn't matter what it is. If you can't see lots of people like you in that job, it's hard then to imagine you in that job. But now it is so different. It's so different. Now you know, it's not easy. You know, we've seen the abuse of female pundits recently, and it's awful. But the good thing about it, if there is any good thing, is that the massive outcry after it. People have been absolutely disgusted at the treatment of these women, and that means that these opinions are changing. The society's viewpoints is gradually changing, and that can only be a good thing.
Yeah. Adam asks, what advice would you give to male colleagues in the media to be better allies? Izzy, what are your thoughts? on this?
That's such a good question. Like for me, it's about men being allies now. It's about standing up for your female colleagues, because it's a tough ask for us to do it on our own. So please help us, because what I love to see is Ian Wright. He's the classic example. He promotes the women's game. He speaks up about Karen Carney and other pundits, and he's spoken out about it. And it makes men realize it's not okay to talk about women like that. And it isn't just men. I mean, it's about being abusive anyway on social media, but it teaches them that that's not right, and it tells young girls and boys from a young age, you can't talk like that. And this big superstar. So yeah, just be it. Don't be afraid to speak up, because it's a lot more attractive when a man is speaking up for women and then being abusive and carrying away from it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, I've really enjoyed this today, and I think this has been a really eye-opening conversation from you both. A couple of comments here, not really questions, but Born to Rover says, thanks for this. Great to hear and good to see Fulhamish supporting. Ben J just says, two queens. Jack J Collins has just done the goat emoji twice. Which is very true. And Ryland Jenkins says, happy International Women's Day to all the Fulham women. And Darius says, happy International Women's Day, ladies. So today is also my birthday. Happy birthday. The best present was that 3 points last night. And just before we finish, just to get your view on yesterday's game, because it was just fantastic, wasn't it, Lids? And I'm still smiling today. And that's the main thing, whether they're male or female. Impact of one result that can make on your mood doesn't change, I guess, does it?
No, it doesn't. The Monday morning after a Fulham win, whether you're a guy or a girl, is surely absolutely amazing. So it's been wonderful, and long may it continue.
Yeah, exactly. And Izzy, are we beating Man City on Saturday?
Yeah, I feel like it's a free hit now. Like, my mood is good. I woke up feeling so good, like smiling, bought every paper virtually. Me and my dad were just like singing still. Oh, it's such a good feeling. And yeah, it's a free hit. Who knows? Like, we're confident, and people are watching their back now.
Oh, amazing. Well, thank you both so much today for speaking to Fulhamish and taking time out of your evenings. I think I echo Ross's views here that this has been really insightful. So thank you to you both.
Oh, thanks so much, Sammy, for listening.
Really happy to have been on. All right.
All right, everyone. Thanks for getting involved today. See you later.
See us.